Welcome to another episode of the Hiring and Empowering Solutions podcast. My name is Molly McGrath, and I am the founder and creator of this revolutionary podcast. Today's guest, we're going to just dive right in. We are speaking with Chelsea Williams, the visionary and founder of Core Solutions Group. And Chelsea has over a decade of accounting experiences and knowledge to not just get your financial house in order, but to set it up for long-term stability, sustainability at a healthy profit. Chelsea has been featured in many different industries and organizations and contributor to law business resources such as the Lean Law Firm podcast. She has been featured and recognized as 2020's Top 100 in Finance Magazine, also featured on the Velocity Work podcast, and she's been a contributor to the Solo Practice University. Welcome, Chelsea. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, so today we're talking about Legalpreneur forecasting, the 3 pillars of financial management. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of this very timely topic, can you give me a little background, give our listeners a little background on how you got started in this industry?
Of course. Yeah. Like you said, I've been doing this for a little over 10 years now. And when I first started, I went the traditional route. I went to a tax and accounting firm, and I was there, made partner after about a year. I ended up being there for 4 years. And the biggest thing that I recognized in the industry traditionally, and in general, not everybody is like this, of course, but it was a very reactive service that we were giving to our clients. You know, we would talk to them maybe once a year for taxes. We weren't talking to them during the year. If something happened with retirement, we wouldn't know until the end of the year, so we couldn't help them pre-plan for it. Maybe we would deliver financials once a month, but it kind of just stopped there. And, in my observation, I'm thinking there are so many things that we could be doing for these people and helping them understand financials. And so when I set out to build Core Solutions Group a little over 2 years ago, my mission was to provide a very proactive tax accounting and cash management service that really picks the ball up where most leave it, being those monthly financial statements. So where most accounting services stop at the delivery of the monthly financial statements, if you even get those, we really pick the ball up and we help make sense of those finances. So that's kind of where I come from and what I've set out to do. And, it all really revolves around my personal mission too, which is this huge gap that we have in this country of no financial literacy. People are not learning in school, be it grade school with our kids, high school with our young adults. Law schools are not teaching it, 98% of them. Nobody is learning this thing of financial literacy and kind of how to bridge that gap. So all of this kind of revolves around my bigger mission of doing that. But through Core Solutions Group, we focus exclusively on law firms and helping them understand their cash.
And as you mentioned, they don't teach you business in law school. They don't teach you finances in law school. And I love your story about the day that you met the lawyer who changed your life. Can you share that with our listeners?
I can. I love this story too. So my husband and I were looking for legal services, and we went through one of the websites where it kind of suggested a few. They get a kickback. You know how that works. And we went to this guy who was in a historic part of downtown where we live. And so I'm super excited because I'm like an old building architecture history person. I really have an appreciation for that. So I'm super excited because this guy's office is on the Abraham Lincoln tour, like where we're at. And so we're getting ready to go in and I'm excited. I'm like waiting to see the inside of this office space. And we open the door and I'm just shocked when I open the door because I kid you not, there were boxes like printer paper boxes. Okay. He had been collecting paper boxes and they were full of files and they were against every single wall. And then somewhere under the pile of stuff, I found the receptionist desk and, we got to talking to her. And so we ended up going back and talking to this guy. And as we were talking, he just seemed very uninterested, very demotivated, almost like he was, not even caring to speak to us. And so my husband and I kind of gave each other that secret look of, okay, let's get out of here. We're done with this. Let's just go. And so we went back out to, pay our consultation fee up front, and the guy started heading upstairs, and I started a conversation with him asking about the building and how long he'd been there. And he told me that he had been in the building for 20 years and had been practicing for 30 years. And he was an older guy. And I said to him, oh, well, that means that you're probably getting ready to retire, right? Like, this is good news. You've got to be nearing your financial freedom. And I could see the look of defeat come on his body language. Like, he slouched forward and his head fell down. And he said, oh, nope, I'll die at my desk. And that was the moment that I knew what I had set out to do was truly going to make a difference. I heard somebody say once, entrepreneurs are the only professionals who will leave a 40-hour-a-week job to make less, working 70 hours a week. And that's not our goal, right? We're not in this to overwork ourselves and not have financial freedom at the end of the road. And so that is really what we're trying to help our clients achieve, is the clarity to see where they're at, where they want to go, and figure out the steps to getting to that place to where they can have financial freedom or work by choice, not by requirement.
And you used a key word there, clarity, right? Even just a visual of his office, which you and I have talked about so often. I've been in millions of law firms across the country in the past 20 years. And that is the experience that I have as well. And I remember saying to the first attorney when I walked in and saw the banker's boxes and the boxes and boxes of files and piles on the desk, how does this not suck the life out of you and the motivation and the energy out of you the second you walk in this office every single day? Like, I'm having a panic attack just being in here. And to your point, it's interesting that you use that word clarity, because the clutter, the visual clutter and the energetic clutter that's there, what you're seeing in their office is, and it communicates to a client, if this is what their office looks like, where's my file? Where will my file be, right? And it's probably very telling of what their books look like, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
So talk to us a little bit. You have this clarity. You're in this office. That experience that changed your life and gave you the vision of your business over a decade ago. And talk to us a little bit about what you saw and what we've talked about here in regards to having that 3 pillars. Talk to us a little bit about what that means.
Yeah. So, accounting is not the end all be all. It's only one piece. And it's not enough even to have the financial clarity. Financial clarity is one thing, but actually using it and taking action to make something happen, just because you see something doesn't mean it's going to move in the direction that you want it to move, right? You have to have follow-up actions to come and actually make a difference and take incremental steps to where you want to be. So the 3 pillars I came up with because there's a back end story, there's a present, and then there's a potential future when you talk about accounting and all of the systems and processes that go into it. So to touch on the first one, which is processes. And this is really not unique to accounting. This is a business concept too, but we speak to numbers. So that's the context where we're going to keep it today. So processes when it comes to accounting systems and money. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of garbage in, garbage out. If you are not collecting and using accurate data in order to filter through your numbers, you're not going to have reliable information. Therefore, you're going to be making business decisions based on inaccurate information. So the processes are the checks and balances that we keep on a monthly basis to make sure that our numbers they're good, solid numbers going in so that we can have good, solid numbers going out. So an example of these processes would be the monthly reconciliations, saving your bank statements. Sometimes we have people who use multiple softwares. So softwares and understanding how they communicate with each other is really important. I was talking to an attorney one time, and I always ask my questions when I'm, looking to see if we're going to be a good fit to work together. I'll say, I asked this particular attorney, so what practice management software are you using? And he goes, Clio. I was like, all right, awesome. Love Clio. Know how to work in there. Good to go. Which accounting software are you working? And he says, Clio. Now, Clio is not a full service accounting software. Clio has limited accounting functions. It's very useful for things like IOLTA, but you are not going to get formal financial statements out of Clio. So processes are going to be making sure that you have the appropriate softwares, that they're communicating efficiently and accurately so that your data going in is clean.
I love that. And it's interesting when you start outsourcing. I always say the best way to get your financial house in order is actually outsource it. Hire a bookkeeper, hire an outsourced service, because they'll go in there and ask the powerful questions. To your point, Clio's not it's not QuickBooks. It's not an area to be managing all of your financials for budget to actual, your P&Ls, your month-end summaries, your reconciliations, etc. And that's the fastest way to get your financial house in order and get everything, to use your term, clean.
Yes, and a lot of people see that as an expense. And, when you're providing reactive services, that's what you are. You are an expense. But if you have a good accounting person that you're working with, your money that goes towards keeping your books up should be an investment, because if you get financial clarity on the other side, you're better equipped to see where you should be going in your financial future to maximize your bottom line.
I say that to attorneys all the time. As you know, I do consulting for law firms, and the first exercise I have them is track their time and go through, find their circle of focus. And when I have them track their time for an entire week and what they have on their to-do list or task list, what they're not getting to and what's sucking the life out of them, it's always the bookkeeping. Whether they do flat fee billing or they do hourly billing, it's not even just the billing of tracking your time and getting all your billing into your Clio, to use your example. But in addition to it, it's all the other stuff that comes with it that takes a back seat. And so often they'll try to convince me, I know how to do it. It only takes me a couple hours a week. I don't mind doing it. It's not that big a deal. But if you can translate and take that 3-4 hours a week that you're spending in that, just even from a time perspective, and outsource it, that's 4 hours that you can dedicate to either revenue generating activities, opportunity generating activities, or anything from a place of growth. And it's not the best use of your time when you're an attorney, and it costs pennies to outsource it compared to what you're able to bill on an hourly basis, and or the strategic byproducts that come out of you spending your time in a more resourceful way.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to speak to your numbers, so, if someone's spending 4 hours a week on accounting, that's 208 hours a year. If they're billing out, let's say $250 an hour, that's $52,000 of lost revenue. So, you're right. Is that the highest and best use of your time? Really?
And not only that, but the energetic hold it has on them, because so often they won't start anything, or they're afraid to go ahead and bring in additional opportunities, because subconsciously the additional work that it's going to take on the bookkeeping side of it. So it's not even just a time perspective, but I think a lot of times I tell people, what if you gave that away? Sometimes I think, especially for the highly analytic and more the introverted attorneys, they hide out behind their computer and not outsourcing that financial. It gives them a crutch or quote unquote excuse to not get out there and generate opportunities from a marketing, sales, or presentation. However you generate qualified leads in your business, sometimes you're using it as a blanket to hide out behind versus outsourcing it.
Yeah, could see that.
So talk to us about the second pillar.
Yeah, so the second pillar is reporting. This is where we get into the fun stuff. Processes are kind of boring, kind of routine. That's kind of just how it goes. But when we get into reporting, things start to get really fun. So financials are one of the absolute most valuable tools you could ever have as an owner in anything. So your financials should really empower you to make not only business decisions, but strategic business decisions. So some of the reports that we produce on a regular basis, on a monthly basis for our clients, and that everybody should be looking at, in my opinion, is the income statement, of course. That's the most popular. It shows your revenue and your expenses. We send out budget variance reports every month. So not only should you have a budget in place, but you should be holding yourself accountable to it every single month. And if something's out of whack, investigate it so you can figure out why and either correct it or adjust going forward. The balance sheet is another important one. It's a lot less used, less analyzed. There's only a couple different areas that we look on there. We look at cash balances, and as it trends over time, and did we expect it? So if it's going down, did we expect that it was going down? Did we pre-plan for that? Did we have financial foresight? And that's okay, we know why. Or is it swinging and we have no idea, and now we need to get to the bottom of it? And then the other area on the balance sheet that we pay the most attention to is the liabilities. Are they going in the direction that we anticipated them to go in? If they're going up, did we know that was going to happen, or is it out of control? If they're going down, was that in the plan? So your reporting, it's really this is where you get your KPIs. And I'll say this too, it's not about just pulling the reports. It is a lot about how the reports are organized. So I say this a lot. If you look at any of our content or any of our videos on YouTube, there's a difference between a standard income statement and a detailed income statement. Most of the time, when you are getting an income statement, you're going to have one and maybe a couple oddball revenue accounts, for example. So you know that you brought in $250,000 in legal fee revenue, but you have no idea what practice area each of them came from, or each of them produced or contributed to that $250,000. And here's why that's important. You could have one practice area that's contributing 50% of your top line revenue, and you're thinking, oh, I need to focus on that because that's bringing in the most cash. But until you have financial clarity, you might not know that what's bringing in 50% of your top line revenue is only contributing to 5% of your bottom line profit. The margins aren't there. And if you were to shift your focus onto a different practice area that has higher margins, now all of a sudden you're maximizing your profitability. And I will say, it's not always about money and profitability. I have some clients who have their heart in a certain practice area in their firm, and it's not very fruitful, it's not very profitable, but we accommodate it by focusing on a more profitable service to kind of fund their heart project, right? So it's not all about the money, but it's about knowing your personal goals, knowing how you can make, and figuring out how to make that work. And the only way that you can do that is through reporting. Another report that a lot of lawyers aren't looking at, 7 out of 10 in my experience, is the AR aging report. Now, whether you get this from your practice management software, depending on where you invoice, or you get it from your accounting software, some people use a different invoicing software, whatever you're invoicing out of, if you are not pulling a monthly report about who owes you how much money and how long they've owed it to you for, you have a cash bottleneck. Your cash is tied up in accounts receivable. We have a really good video on my YouTube channel. I've got 4 steps to an effective AR process. And I recommend it to a lot of people who are experiencing this because it's so common. So, like I said, reporting is really the heartbeat of what is happening and how you can better equip yourself to have financial foresight and manipulate the numbers into the direction that you're wanting to go.
This is the number one area that I see when I start working with firms that is lacking when I talk to them. So you use the terminology KPIs, which is key performance indicators for some of our listeners. I'm amazed at how many attorneys I talk to and I use that term. They're like, what's a KPI? They're not really aware of it, but it's your key performance indicators. And to your point, what I love about 2 things that you said, okay, you have your income statement, then you have your budget variance report and your balance sheet that breaks down your cash balances, your liabilities, etc. 2 things that you said that really stuck out for me that I think is important to highlight for our listeners. Number 1 is the makeup of your practice. So often people just pay attention to money in, money out and look at their revenue, but not looking at the breakdown. When I talk to law firms and attorneys and say, talk to me about the breakdown of your practice, 9 out of 10 cannot answer that in the beginning of what percentage of the revenue and where it comes from. They'll just throw it in a pool let's use estate planning. That's the bulk of, in my heart project, so to speak, my favorite attorneys to work with. And they'll just say, it's estate planning. I do all estate planning. I'm okay. You don't do any probate. You don't do any trust admin. You don't do any VA or Medicaid apps or elder law or anything in that nature. Well, yeah, of course we do. Okay, well, they need to be broken down. And it's fascinating because so often people, when they start to break it down, two things. One, they'll be a little surprised about where the bulk of their revenue is coming from, but also the resources that go into that in regards to generate that revenue, especially marketing dollars, employee time, all, time, money, all the resources that go into it. And when we start breaking it down and then start figuring out what brings them the most joy, what their heart project is, and where that comes from. And it might not, to your point, it might not generate the most revenue, but you need to keep the lights on. You are a business owner, and you can then start talking about shifting people in the practice to serve in the areas that do bring in the most revenue, systematize it, process it, and then allow for you to be freed up to work on your heart project because you're not worried about how you're going to cover payroll on Friday. The other thing I want to speak into is the AR aging report. Many law firms that I work with do flat fee billing. They don't have hourly. They have a tiny bit of hourly work. So if you are doing flat fee billing, one thing that I really want to point out, and I love that you brought that up, is so often they'll say, well, we do flat fee billing. They give a 50% retainer at the beginning and then 50% when work is completed and delivered at the signing meeting or what have you, delivery meeting. And when I start having them pull reports of what's outstanding, because people do cancellations, they continually reschedule their appointments, and they don't come in for that final meeting where the 50% is due. And we start looking at things that have not been closed and or are stuck in the process. It's so fascinating to me of how many times they overlook at that and they start pulling what's still holding out there. And quite often, it just requires an hour or two of work and some intentionality and awareness that you can bring in that additional revenue. So I really, really appreciate that you brought up that AR aging report, because so often people will negate that if they're doing flat fee billing versus hourly.
Yep, I see that too. I can agree.
So, and I want to talk about reporting too, because this is a big, whether you're having accurate reporting or consistent reporting, whether it comes from your marketing initiatives or it comes from a financial. I hear so often from a solopreneur, somebody who does not have a quote unquote big team. So often when attorneys will call me and they'll say, well, I'm not a big law firm. That's their first statement to me. And then when I kind of get them over that barrier and talk about, the E-Myth talks about this, Robert Kiyosaki talks about this, you begin with the end in mind and you start operating. And when you're hanging your shingle, you're starting your own business, so you start operating like you are a business versus owning a job. Can you talk to us a little bit about a brand new attorney and or a solopreneur, maybe 1-2 team members, a smaller firm, how crucial it is to start this reporting at the ground floor versus waiting until you get quote unquote big?
I love the calls that I get from attorneys that when they reach out to me, they're like, I'm thinking about going out on my own. And I think this is something that I want to do sooner rather than later, because their head is really in the right place. And I tell people, because I do get the other type of call that says, well, I just started, I'm only 3 months in, I don't think I need any of this right now, so I think I'll just come back later. And my response to them is, you have more time right now than you're going to have in 3 months. And when it comes to your numbers, there is a foundation that has to be set. Knowing your revenue formulas, knowing your time and money calculations, which I'll get into a little bit more in forecasting, what it does for you is it gives you insight into, if you have any plans on growing, if you have any plans on hiring help, even if it's a VA for administrative work, you should know at what point do you need to hire. And unless you know your revenue formulas and the corresponding time and expense commitments that it takes to generate that amount of revenue, you are going to be you're going to find yourself in a position where you're reacting to more business coming in, and now you're scrambling and reacting to this growth instead of planning for it. Success is planned for, it doesn't just happen.
That's phenomenal. Thank you for that. That is great, because so often you do hear that for people that are starting out and looking to hang their shingle. And honestly, from my perspective, you are the first phone call they should be making. And how do I set this up properly without going in and just throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, and just operating by pay the rent law, so to speak.
Yeah. And we actually have a setup service that is specific for people that are just starting out, who it probably doesn't make sense for them to outsource their accounting just yet. And so what we do is we create the platform for their accounting software. We customize their chart of accounts, which means making sure that their financial statements are going to be presented in a detailed way according with their matter types. And we uncover their revenue formulas. We put together a budget template for them. And then what we do is we create the processes and monthly checklists and biweekly checklists and quarterly checklists and biannual and annual checklists, so that they are equipped with everything that they need, because not everybody is in a position to outsource accounting, especially if you're just starting out. But having the tools at your disposal to be able to do it right until the time when you can outsource it can really make the difference. So we recognize that, and we cater to it with a very specific startup service that covers all of this, everything around the accounting system.
And then when you do that setup, hearing you say go through that process, I can feel my heart pound a little bit, where it could become overwhelming, especially for a startup. So when you walk them through setting up that process, is it truly, once you show them what reports to run, how much time would you anticipate that it takes for a startup to generate the reports and look at that and get in the habit of doing weekly and monthly analysis?
So, I mean, it definitely depends on how much they have in transactional volume. But if they're just starting out, let's say maybe they have about 20 to 50 transactions a month, it should be taking them about 3 to 4 hours a month after they're pulling financials and analyzing them. And now keep in mind, all of the setup we do behind the scenes. We take care of all the mechanics behind setting up your systems. And the only thing that people do that you would do on a monthly basis after that is code all of your transactions, go through the checks and balances, which is pulling your bank statements, comparing them to the rec report out of your accounting software and saving them, and then producing the reports. So there's no adjustments that need to be made. We automate as much as possible. And so it's really just a matter of coding everything, performing the checks and balances, and pulling the reports.
Great. Okay, so talk to us about the third pillar.
Forecasting. Yes. So I've mentioned a few times about uncovering your revenue formulas, or at least your revenue, your cash trends. So everybody has a revenue formula. I don't care what business you're in, what your seasonality is. I get a lot of pushback from settlement-based law businesses in this area. But through a number of different techniques, we can get to the point, and everybody should be getting to the point to where they are forecasting. So this is the financial foresight that I keep talking about. We have a tool on our website, and that I talk about a lot, because this is what we use to create formulas to be able to forecast out into the future. But we have a tool called the Profitability by Practice Area that's a free download on our website. And what it does, and it's a really good exercise. So what we do is we go through each practice area, and like you spoke to earlier, one practice area may have 5 different matter types. We may have sub buckets for our practice areas, and we should. And what we do is we dissect how much, not only in money, because a lot of times people forget about time. You can make $1 million, but if you don't have an hour to spend it, what does it matter? So the spreadsheet goes through the time and the money that it takes in order to generate a certain amount of income. So we're listing out all of your team members. We're listing out their hourly rates. We are talking, we'll look at one very specific matter type and account for everything. How many phone calls does the receptionist usually take on average for this one matter type? How much time does your secretary put into there? Is there paralegal work involved? Is the rainmaker involved? How much time? Are there any expense considerations? Does it cost any filing fees that you don't charge back to the client? Are you meeting them for meals? So we're considering marketing dollars in here too. Marketing is metrics. We get into conversations with people about marketing all the time, not because we're marketing experts, but because we recognize that you should be chasing a vending machine return on your marketing dollars instead of a slot machine. And so when people put money into marketing at first, it's normally like a slot machine approach. They're kind of just throwing money in, holding their hands out and hoping something kicks out the bottom. But what they want to be working towards is a vending machine where they put $1 out, they get a candy bar at the bottom. There's a return on investment. So we're even considering marketing metrics to make sure that they're paying attention to return on investment in their marketing dollars. And this spreadsheet goes through how much it costs and what the profit margins are per matter type. And then at the bottom, it has a formula that you can manipulate. And this is where the forecasting comes into play. So if we're working with somebody and they have a specific gross revenue marker that they want to make in any given year, we play with these numbers and say, okay, if you take on 200 of this matter type, 100 of this matter type, or sometimes we'll take historical data. Sometimes we'll take how many matter types they had in the previous year and we'll plug it in and then set goals from there. And all the while, this spreadsheet is calculating their gross revenue and their gross profit for the entire year. So when you uncover your formulas and your profit margins, you now have the power to forecast out, not only in dollars, because this spreadsheet is considering time as well, so that you know when to hire your next team member. But then what you can do is forecast everything out into the future and say, if this is my goal, I believe you call your shot. If this is the goal, if this is where you're going, what's it going to take to get there? And at what point are you going to have to do things like hire help?
In spending time on your website prior to recording our podcast, I spent some time on your resources tab. And as you're saying all this, there is absolutely no reason that I know you said a lot in regards to forecasting around hiring, things of that nature, but the profitability per practice area tool on your website, in addition to the budget tool and the forecasting tool, there is no reason you can't get started. I love all the tools that you have here to set up your foundation to get started with implementing the pillars. And so often, even a budget, it's fascinating because you think it would be something that would come natural for attorneys, but they don't teach you about business. They don't teach you about finance in law schools. They, teach you how to be a really, really great attorney. And that's no small feat. I'm not negating that. But when it comes to generating revenue and keeping your law firm operating and hopefully in a place where you can have an exit strategy and sell it, you need these best practices in place. And now is the time to do it. So often you all hear me talking about your growth plans. I had a podcast a couple weeks ago about implementing internal strategic retreats. And this is a time, especially in the beginning of the new year, as we hit the close of Q1, for you to start implementing this now, because it's the biggest stress that I hear from attorneys. And I'm sure you hear this as well, in regards to they bury their head in the sand when it comes time for looking at their books. When you ask them about their numbers, I physically have seen attorneys, to your point, where they put their head down and their whole body language change, where I'm going to die at my desk. And that doesn't have to be your story.
Right. And, I didn't mention in the processes, but one of our free downloadables too is called bank account budgeting. It's our cash management strategy. This strategy is one of the most effective practices that we help our clients put into place. And the resource will help you crunch the numbers based on whatever information that you have. But essentially, what we're doing is we are separating cash into physically different bank accounts according to what they should be spent on. So for example, with this system, what happens is we have a revenue account. All of the money earned from your law business goes into this one bank account. We get to a point to where only two times a month we're going in and we are transferring all the money out of the revenue account and into sub accounts. based on percentages that we calculate on, from their numbers. Now, those sub-accounts, for example, could be owner's compensation. So we want to prioritize you getting paid. And then we might have payroll. So it's good to separate out payroll. We usually always do that because payroll is such a big piece of your expense picture that it's nice to have that cash completely separated so that you know it's there when it needs to be there in the amount that it needs to be in. Another account is profit and another account is tax. So we physically separate this money so that you know what can be spent through OPEX versus what needs to be not touched for things like tax or profit or payroll.
And how refreshing is that once you know, out of sight, out of mind, so to speak, and you're already planning for your future and the expenses. It really eliminates the stress when it comes time to quote unquote tax time. It doesn't even affect you because you've already planned for that.
Yeah. And, I'll tell you who it works best for. And because it eliminates the stress, like you said, it's a let me sleep peacefully at night mechanism. And the people that it works the best for are settlement-based law businesses. Because think about it. If you get a giant settlement, right, and you know your numbers and that hits the revenue account, your payroll's taken care of for months. Even if you go a few months, and that's their fear. Well, what if I go a few months and I don't have a big settlement? You've already set it aside. It's there. And because of the historical data that we have to work with, we know that it's going to be there until your next settlement comes in based on your historical averages.
That's fantastic. The beauty of Core Solutions Group, Chelsea, is that so often I've had a few other people on here in regards to financials. And I know quite often when you're looking at outsourcing a bookkeeper, et cetera, it's almost like outsourcing marketing where you just hand everything over because it's overwhelming. And I've had people say it's like voodoo. I don't understand it. I hand it over. And then I'm not really sure if it's working, if it's not working, questions I should be asked, what I'm looking for in your resources that you have on your website. It's not to encourage the attorney to outsource the books if they have the proper time to do so, especially to your point, if they're hanging their own shingle and they're just getting started or in a place of scaling or growing. And you're teaching them how to manage their own finances. You're giving them the resources that there's absolutely no excuse to get started and be able to plan your work your plan and plan for growth. And then at the time when it's appropriate, you can outsource. So having the resources to be able to implement the 3 pillars that you speak about today, starting with your processes, knowing your processes from the technology, the mechanics, et cetera, the reporting, and knowing what to look for. And then in addition to the forecasting, everything you have here on your website, which in my experience, I never really run into anybody that's playing in the financial space, especially in the legal financial space, that offers such a comprehensive step-by-step process to be able to implement it today, and you providing the tool to get these foundations set up.
Yeah, I think that I don't believe in work for work's sake. And if something's working and it's working right, there's no reason to shift it. I wrote a really extensive blog that's also on the website about outsourcing or in-house bookkeeping and kind of how to navigate that decision and figure out what's best for your firm. Because sometimes it makes sense for you to have an in-house bookkeeper and it works just fine. And if you're getting the reports that you need and they're useful to you, then that might be a better fit for you. So I'm a big believer in this is not a one size fits all. You have to do what's best for your firm. And, like I said before, my heart mission behind all of this is really to provide financial literacy, and not even just for attorneys. I have a class that I put on for my local community here for low income households on financial literacy. I think it's a gap. And I think that people need these tools, whether you work with us or not. Our goal is to give you information that's going to help you.
And you have endless helpful resources and information on your website. So thank you very much for that and for your mission and your stand for that. Okay, I think this is a good starting point. So tell our listeners how they can get a hold of you and stay connected and download some of your wonderful best practice tools on your website.
Oh man, we're everywhere. So the website is yourcoresolution.com. We are on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I love my Instagram page. It's so pretty. Love it. I'm on LinkedIn. And I think that's about it. We're a little bit of everywhere. The YouTube channel is under my name, Chelsea Williams. But all of the links can be found on the website.
Great. And I'll post it in the show notes, yourcoresolution.com. And I'll put the free resources there, link where you can download the budget tool, profitability per practice area tool, forecasting tool. And you have many different wonderful YouTube videos there that are just phenomenal, from a training and from a education to motivate perspective. So wonderful job. And thank you for being our guest today and sharing so much value with our listeners and really empowering them to get started now. There's no reason that you can, just by visiting Chelsea's free resources tab. So thank you for being our guest today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Indeed. Okay, so we'll have in the show notes all the ways to stay connected with Chelsea, how to go to her website and download your free resources. Until next time, this has been another episode of Hiring and Empowering Solutions.